Hey everybody, welcome to the Paula Peralta Show. I'm your host, Paula Peralta, as you know. Thank you so much for being here. I am joined, and I feel like I always say this, so I'm not going to say it, but we've got a really incredible conversation coming, and the best part about it is we don't even really know what exactly it's going to be like, but I'm here with Cassandra McGlaughlin, who is McGlaughlin. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
what?
You got it. McGlaughlin.
I'm here with Cassandra McGlaughlin. I've known you for like 15 years, and
because you usually call me Cassandra Platinum.
I'm here with Cassandra Platinum.
Yeah, I know. Like, no one says my actual
That's her Instagram, Cassandra Platinum. Cassandra McGlaughlin, who I said 15 years, but I don't know that it's been that long. It's been
close because it was before I moved from Missouri back to Florida, which was like 2000, maybe 8, 9.
Yeah. So
yeah,
and it's been almost 15 years, which is wild because it feels like it just yesterday we met.
I know
the romance bloomed. Blossomed. So we actually met doing hair, but we're not talking about hair today. Because there's a lot of things that I want to talk to you about. We haven't actually really seen each other in a while and had kind of a deep dive into life and things, but I know a lot of things have changed for you. We are those kinds of friends that like check in.
Like a couple times a year? Yeah. And like, still love you. Are you alive? Amazing. Tell me all the things.
And it's like a 1 hour download. And then we're like, okay, awesome. Good job. Keep going.
6 months later.
You got this.
Yeah. I love it though. It's amazing.
I know. So, and now we're just going to take it live on a podcast.
Yeah. It's like instead of like deep diving on the phone, just record it all.
And show the world.
Show the world.
Okay, so one of the things that I want to talk to you about first is I know that recently you became a trauma-informed master coach.
Master coach.
Yeah, for the master being the key component.
Yes.
Master. What does that even mean?
Okay, well, I'm going to take you on a journey.
Thank you.
So I actually, I got into coaching, I think a lot initially through education. Mm-hmm. It just, was a natural part of what I was doing. It's, always turned into business or whatever. And I think in the coaching space, I was looking at it, I'm like, okay, what do I do to actually make this official? Which I don't know if that's necessary, but it kind of felt like a thing for me. And I went through an initial program where I got certified in neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. So it's a lot of mindset. It was really how do you reframe your thoughts and how do you ask the right questions? And it was really mindset based, looking at your personal history and how that plays out in your habits and your strategies. And that was cool, but it really lacked a little bit of the depth that I was looking for because I was kind of on my own. And I don't know why I have such an aversion to this word, but it's healing journey. It's whatever. Okay, but we all know what we mean. But I was doing my own work basically. Yeah. And I was deep diving, I was doing inner child work and working through somatic work and breath work. And what the NLP and the mindset work was missing for me was incorporating the actual body and the somatic work. And so that's where a lot of trauma is stored. And so I actually ended up going through this year-long intensive program. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Huge investment, huge time investment. I had to commit, I think it was to over 300 coaching hours in that period of just practice. And it was homework. It was a college course basically. But I got my certification as a trauma-informed master coach. And what that means, it's not at a therapist level, obviously. Coaching is not meant to replace or compete with therapy. It means that I've got information that can help resolve some trauma that lives in the body. I have tools for that. Or if someone goes into trauma, I can help coach them out of it. So that's kind of the essence of it, but it's such a big undertaking. There were so many different aspects that we considered. It was the stages of development and personality patterns, how they're formed even from the time that you're born, how different trauma impacts your life. There's trauma that can happen in utero, that can impact the way that we show up in this world. And so it's really an understanding of that and how to help manage it in certain ways. And so it's a lot to do with somatics. It's a lot to do with the body. And I mean, trauma lives in our body. We see it expressed in so many different ways and it impacts our lives, how we show up. And so being able to guide people through that, even from the perspective of business coaching, which is not exclusively what I do, but it's where I started. Mm-hmm. it informs how we show up. It's our boundaries, it's our conversations, it's being willing to say no. Like something that simple and like not feel guilty.
Yeah.
It's like those emotions that show up and we feel the physical sensations in our body, and there's a resistance that shows up that like we have no idea where it actually is coming from. It's usually some form of trauma pattern. So that is the master coach.
I love it. Okay, so let's dive a little diaper.
Do a little diaper.
Because I do have some questions about that. And I will say too that a lot of I also became like a certified facilitator a few years ago and have been doing more like one-on-one conversations, and I can actually, so much of that totally resonates because a lot of the issues that I deal with are things that people have with money. And so much of that is it's connected to trauma.
Yeah.
Whether it's like, you know, an interaction that you saw with your parents, or you asking for money at some point and someone being like, how dare you charge such exorbitant prices, or whatever it is. Like there's a million ways that it shows up, but I think it's really interesting to look at how things that we do on a regular basis, like you said, they are connected to like trauma. And I think when people say the word trauma or they hear the word trauma, they think like this earth-shattering, like my life is crumbling sort of event. But can you actually back up a little bit, and what is trauma?
Yeah, I mean, it can show up in so many different ways. So like at its core, like the definition we used in the coaching program was anything that was too much, too soon, too fast. And so that. Like it can show up in many different ways depending on the person. Somebody could experience a violent beating and be able to process that in a different way. And it could be not quite as traumatic. And someone could be told that they're stupid, and that could be massively traumatic. Like it is super relative to how we process and what we make that mean. And then like the capacity we have. So if something's too much, too soon, too fast, it is traumatic. And the beautiful thing is like using that definition on the flip side, when we look at healing, it's like we don't want to do the healing that way. We can't go too much, too soon, too fast. It's almost the opposite.
Right.
It's like low and slow. And like that's where the healing comes in. I think it's like a really beautiful way to kind of frame it, because it takes the stigma out of trauma having to be something like massive. And like we can understand like we all can experience trauma in many different ways, and it can show up like you're talking about with money. I mean, that could be a self-worth thing too. Someone could have said, you know, one time like, you're not worth that. And like you take it in, you believe it, you make it mean something, and then all of a sudden that's a trauma that you're processing through for the rest of your life. And it's playing out this pattern where it's like anytime someone offers you something, it's like, oh no, I'm not worth that. Like, or you try and raise your prices, and it's like you get that sinking feeling in your gut, and you're like, oh, I can't do that. And so that's a form of trauma. So it can be a lot of different things. It's not one specific type of incident. It can be a lot of different things. It's how you perceive it, it's how your body receives it, and it's how you emotionally process it and how it shows up the rest of your life.
I love so much, and I just want to I love all of this. And I also want to highlight one of the things that I love the most about you, and I think one of the things we connect on is it's like always what else is there, because you're like, oh, I just went through like neuro-linguistic programming and hypnosis and all this, and then I was like, what else is there out there? And I'm like, yes, because that's the same for me. Like I'm like, but what is this? Like really, when you start to interact with people, and I think that's, you know, like I said, we both are hairdressers, and so we are in the business of people,
right?
And so you're constantly interacting with like people's trauma, and it's so interesting to me. I think it's fascinating to look at like why people are the way that they are. And more than that, it's like, I'm interested in showing up as my best self in every situation.
Right.
And so it's not always like about helping other people. It's like sometimes about helping yourself.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the biggest benefits out of the program was like me going through it from the idea of helping other people, but I had to do my own work at the same time. And like a lot of the homework was like about our own specific traumas or like our own beliefs about ourselves. And so like you have to pull from your own depths to actually understand. And like I think in the coaching world, like trying to take someone somewhere where you haven't been willing to go is like the ultimate travesty.
Yep.
It's like the inability to like understand or empathize if you haven't gone there yourself creates potentially more trauma in a way if you're trying to like make someone do something. So I think like being willing to do your own work was so important. And like that's an amazing thing. It's like you learn for other people, but like you get as much back for yourself in
Totally.
that. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's where like you start to see, I mean, in the coaching world and even in the therapy world, I think you can totally tell the difference between people that are like trying to be a guru and the people that are actually genuinely interested in facilitating the healing of someone else. Because when you're facilitating someone else, like you understand that it's not even about you.
It's not about
like all you're doing is kind of holding up a mirror and saying like, maybe look at it from this way, or like, have you thought about this? Or, you know, whereas like that guru thing is the facilitator's inability or like unwillingness to be vulnerable.
It's ego.
Yeah, totally. I
think,
love that.
Like the biggest pivot that I made in my coaching work was that idea of like, this is not actually about me. And like when I started to feel scared when I was coaching, it's because I was trying to be right. I was trying to like have the answer, try to provide it. And the act of just simply being curious changed it. And I'm like, I don't actually have to know anything. I just have to ask a question. What did that mean to you? What did you make that mean? How's that showing up in your life? Where did you first see this? Like, you just ask the questions and you're just the guide. And the client does their own work. That's the magic. I think when the coach tries to do the work for the client, that's where it kind of turns into a muddy disaster. And you can see that. Like, when someone is really facilitating it for themselves and the client is just kind of part of the process, that feels very different when it really is about just facilitating the journey for the client. And they may not even get to the point of healing a trauma, but it at least can open the investigation. And a lot of times their own brain will do the work after too. Like, I know for me, like I've gone through some really major trauma sessions with some of my coaches. And in the process, I'm like, I'm okay. Everything's fine. Like, I feel good. Yeah, I understand it. 12 hours later, like, massive anger like release. I'm like, no, like freaking out and screaming, all the things. Yeah. But like, there is a processing time. And so I think as a coach, it's like, you cannot be invested in being the one that it's like, oh, I did this. It's like, no.
Well, and I love too, going back to that thing you were saying about like too much, too soon, too fast, like even especially on like the healing journey, which is exactly what it is. So I think it's okay to say healing journey. But that thing about like, we want it. So once we've identified the trauma, it's like you want it to just be done.
Right.
And so you always look for the thing that's going to like resolve it, or what you think is going to resolve it immediately. And you can just be like, okay, cool. I figured that out and I've moved on. But especially as I've like done more work, like self-work, I've realized that like it is not that. And in fact, if anyone offers you a quick fix, like if anyone offers you a quick fix or says that you can, like, it's actually not true.
Well, that's again,
like, you've got to be with it.
Right. That's again where it can end up being re-traumatizing. Again, like it's too much, too soon, too fast. If someone says one and done, no. Like that's maybe like if you can process that quickly, but like that's not what healing is. And it's also not finite. Like there is not like a stop along the way. There is like resolving old patterns, reframing them, but trauma doesn't actually fully ever leave. It can transmute, it can change, but like it's always still part of our programming. It's just the choice to do something different. And so I think that there is like an aspect of like the checking the box of healing. And it's like, that's not a box to check. It's like, it's always a process. And I think if anyone sells you anything differently, there's a chance that there actually could be harm in that, which to me is kind of scary in the coaching world. Cause I think that there are some really beautiful, amazing coaches. And then like in any industry, there's some people that are maybe less qualified.
Maybe shouldn't be doing what they're doing.
And like it's people who haven't done their own work, or they haven't created the results that they're promising, or they're trying to like basically enforce their system of healing on someone. They're like, well, this worked for me, and there's no singular path. That's why I think having a coach that is like a guide and open and curious is so much more important, because it has to be whatever journey your body's got to take. Some people are like an arrow and they can go straight. And I've experienced that with some patterns. I'm like 1-2 sessions, I can process it like an arrow. There's some things it's like a spiral. It's like up, down, up, down. Like, oh, I think I'm good. No, you're not. I think I'm good. No, you're not. And it's like, but there is a forward trajectory. So I think it's like having someone who can embrace that and move with you is so important versus the people who are, I mean, truthfully, like, it is ego. It's like, I can do this. I can help you. I can create this for you. And it's like,
Yeah.
You're not the one.
You are not the one.
You are not the one.
Okay, so what's something, is there, and I mean, this is like kind of deeper dive, but like, are there things, okay, there's so many places I want to go with this, but one is, like, what do you say to someone who's like, oh, like, I don't have any trauma?
It's possible.
Yeah?
Yeah, it is possible.
Yeah.
Actually, I just heard this on a podcast, but there are some people who experience life without being traumatized by it. It is possible. It is a rare bird.
Where are you? Like, what? Tell me your secrets.
Send me a DM. Tell me what's happening.
For real. Because it's like, even for me, I'm like, that is so wild to even think that. I mean, I guess I could see it.
Well, there's things like people develop like a really secure attachment with their parents very young. Mm-hmm. And so a secure attachment, which is interesting, is that it's not about someone not doing something wrong, but there's repair, and there's repair quickly. Mm-hmm. And so when a child has parents that form a secure attachment and they create repair in short order, there is a security that takes the sting and the weight out of trauma. So it doesn't mean that they haven't experienced something that could be traumatic. It just never got processed like trauma in their body because they had repair and they had security. And so they had a knowing that they were going to be cared for and protected. So even if something like severe happened, they had the security that they were going to be protected, and they knew it without question. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't actually form as trauma. It didn't create that traumatic path. So it does exist.
That's wild. Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah.
What is like the benefit of processing your trauma? Like what's the purpose of a deep dive?
I mean, I think it's if you're stuck, if you're repeating patterns, if there's like unwanted behaviors, if you're looking to like create deeper connection or more relationship, if you're looking to grow your business, like there's so many different things. Like basically it's like if there's areas of growth that you cannot access on your own, it's very likely that there is a traumatic pattern or some kind of behavioral pattern that's causing you to have a block. And so if you recognize a block or you recognize something like that, it's worth looking into. It's not always trauma, but very often it can be. So,
and what's something like, I know you said you've done a ton of work, but do you feel like I know it's a journey, but on the other side of kind of the initial deep dive, what do you feel like some of the benefits that have been created for you?
Oh, like immediately, like I did a lot of inner child work initially, and that was big. What that allowed me to see were like a lot of patterns of like isolation and like being alone and like keeping like space between people and not being able to connect, or like, I mean, there was like some deep shit in there too, like not being lovable, like all of those things. So like the benefits of actually like challenging that belief that was formed very young is that I actually get to have a different belief about myself, which means whereas I thought I wasn't lovable, now I can actually find love. Where I thought I was always going to be alone, I can find connection. So, like, that's a benefit.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where, like, it's interesting because one of the things I know that came up for me when I started doing a lot of the personal development work was that, like, I realized that they're all stories.
100%.
Right? So it's like, what story are you telling yourself? Like, are you telling yourself the story that you're unlovable? Are you telling yourself the story that, you're not beautiful, or you are only capable of achieving, a certain amount of success, or whatever that is? It's like when you actually start to just look at it as this like sort of objective thing of like, oh, here's a story about like a girl named Paula, right? And then you're like, oh, that's a story. So like, what other stories are there? Or like, does this story actually work for me? What other story would I like to rewrite? And I think that's the empowerment of like personal development work, like that healing journey, like all of that, whatever the modality is. It's like that thing of realizing that you truly are the creator of your reality is so freeing.
It's like such an intense form of personal responsibility that like, it can be kind of overwhelming because like if you get into a place where you're like, I don't want any of this, it's like, well, you actually do. There's a book I read, it's one of my favorite books, it's called Existential Kink, and there's a part in it, it's having is evidence of wanting. So if you've got it, you want it. And so it's a whole thing, but it talks about really like embracing the patterns that we've created that we actually don't like about ourselves, but you actually do like it because you're recreating it. But it's like embracing it to the point of like getting turned on by it. And it's like that's where the existential kink comes in. But it's really fascinating because it's like that actually allows you to let it go.
Yeah.
It's the rejection of it. It's
Totally.
the hatred of it that causes you to hold on to it. And so it's really interesting to like get to a point of like looking at those patterns, like you said, like stories, and then looking at those stories and be like, what are they actually creating for me that I actually do want, but I'm afraid to admit that I want. And like that could be something as like picking the wrong person in a relationship because like you actually want to feel rejected. And like getting to that point where you're like, yeah, I do want to feel rejected, and like actually embracing it, like it's wild.
Yeah.
But it allows you to release it because you quit hating it.
Yeah.
You quit rejecting the rejection. Like it's like this whole thing, and it can get like really meta and like crazy. But like there is this element of like pure self-acceptance, personal responsibility, like full empowerment, like. I am in charge of my thoughts. I'm in charge of my reality. Like, I am creating this. And what I have is what I want. So if I want something different, I need to actually change what is creating this in my life.
Totally. It's so true. I just had a session with a woman who like, she was like, I can't find love is kind of like the short answer. And I was like, well, to your point, I was like, if you don't have a relationship, it's because
what you want.
Yeah, you don't want a relationship. Yeah. And she was like, what do you mean? Of course I want a relationship. But it's so interesting when you start to look at that. And you mentioned this, like, it's really confronting.
Yeah.
To be like, whoa. Like if whatever, even if you look at the things that are showing up in your life, like, oh, I don't know, I'm going to go back to money again, like a lack of money. It's like, well, there's something you love about it. Right. Because you keep creating it. So what is the thing? Like, I love the idea of it being a kink. Because it is a kink. Like, it's totally a thing that you just are chained to. Because you keep choosing it. So,
well, and I think,
love that.
Like, there's this whole thing, too, with it. It's like, if you're making these choices on repeat, like, whether or not you admit it, there's an intention behind it. And it's like, there is a choice.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when you look at things like money or a lack of money or a relationship, it's like, well, I haven't found the right person or I haven't found the right, like there's like this external thing that we like to blame it on because it's really easy. And like grabbing that power back and being like, oh, wait, no, this is a choice. It's scary, like to do that at first. Like it is really scary to be like, I've actually caused all the things like I quote unquote don't want. But like being able to like reframe that, like there is such a power in that. And I think that like, that's kind of where coaches come in too. It's like you can guide through that like process of like scary to empowering, and like like not do it alone. Yeah. And so I don't know. I agree. Like there is a confronting element of it, but it's really freaking cool when you can get to the other side.
Totally. Like ultimately being empowered, it is the like baseline I think for the creation of your life in a way that works for you. 100%. And that's I look a lot, even just for myself, because like you, I do a lot of things and I have a lot of businesses and I'm like a lot of great relationships. And for me, I'm constantly on this like edge of looking at things like burnout and overwhelm. And one of the things I've really been looking at a lot is like, if I am experiencing this like sense of burnout, it used to very much be to like, I would still run myself into the ground and I would just totally ignore it. And then I would be completely debilitated and have to be in bed for like a week or two and just unplug. Whereas now, like, that thing about being empowered, and I've realized like, okay, I'm creating this, like I'm creating my reality. So what is this? Like, is there something here that I don't love? Is there something here that needs to change? Like what sort of behaviors, what components of this aren't working that are causing this sort of thing? And like, while it can sound so like, ooh, like so woo and whatever, it's actually a thing. Like when you're willing to actually get to that point where you've empowered yourself enough to acknowledge your capacity to create anything, that includes the good, the bad, and the ugly that shows up in your life. Yeah. Ugh,
well, and like
so good.
That is it. Like the empowerment doesn't mean that like the patterns just go away. It's the power to question it and challenge it. Yep. It's like, oh, is this actually what I'm choosing? Is this actually what I want? No? Cool. I get to do something different versus like the victim of circumstance or the victim of the burnout or the victim of whatever. And like, I always think like, anything that like starts to show up as a like resistance, it's like that's your investigation. Like why am I pushing against this? Or like why am I doing something I actually like don't like I don't want to do in my core? And you investigate the resistance. Like there's a saying in coaching, it's like triggers are the mirrors. And so it's the same thing. I think it's like the resistance is the mirror. Like what do you choose to look at? Like, or what do you choose to like basically like surrender to and become the victim of? And so I think it's being willing to look at it and just question it. Like a simple question could be like, you know, am I doing what I actually want to do right now? Or am I like betraying myself and like choosing something I don't want? And that could be an act too of saying like the martyrdom or like whatever story we have of ourselves, or like there is like a lot of validation in burnout. It's like I've worked so hard and like there's like a big like box to check in identity with that. And like that's a big conversation I have with my partner too, is around like identity. And like identity is such a limiting thing. Like how we identify ourselves, like I'm this, I'm that, and da-da-da. And it becomes such a box that we have to shove ourselves in, that we will manifest things like burnout and scarcity and lack to stay in an identity that feels so comfortable. And it's like you start to break those bonds of who you think you are and become actually like infinite and actually a creator and actually a manifester. You're like, I don't have to have any of that. It's like, break the shackles.
Yeah. And then it becomes choice.
It's all choice.
Like it is, everything is just a choice.
Yeah.
And you can pivot and you can change and you can turn things upside down. And I actually love that, because one of the things that because I tend to live in a land of extremes, like I'm either in or out, like there is no halfway. And I've really like in that personal development work, I've gotten to a place where I've realized that it's like not always about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like sometimes you actually have to look at things and be like, okay, this really sucks, but it doesn't mean that all of it sucks. Like all of the components. But that thing of like really being willing to look at, like, let me lay out all 10 pieces that are components of this whatever problem, we'll say, and like 1 through 6 might actually work. Like 7 might need a little tweaking, 8, 9, and 10 can go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, or maybe sometimes it's just 10 that needs to go. But that thing of like, I love what you said in the beginning, like the work is never done, because that's always the work of like constantly looking at the pieces and being like, what parts of this are good and can stay or contribute or whatever, you know, and what parts need to go.
Yeah, it's kind of like the principle of like the 80-20 rule. It's like, look at the 20% that's actually causing the impact and being willing to let go of the 80% or like, you know, and it, whatever 80-20 rule, but like kind of that concept. And I think that that's sometimes the hard parts, because the parts that like we actually should let go of are probably the parts that are creating the patterns that feel comfortable, that keep us in that like loop where it's like, I'm such a hard worker, I'm such a this, and like all whatever that identity is. It's like that's the evaluation of like, is this actually serving me in the direction that I want to go with my life? And that's like growing like a really strong response, like a sacral response, a yes, no, this is a line, not a line, is super important. To be able to like feel in your body, like, what does your higher self actually want? Or is this a pattern? And there's times, I mean, patterns can present themselves as truth. Like they feel
it
true.
Feels real.
It's like I was wronged and it was this. I mean, I feel like no matter how much work I do, like especially in a relationship, like getting confronted with like old patterns that feel so true, it's like such an eye-opening experience of like, there has to be constant questioning. There has to be a willingness to examine reality at every aspect.
Which I feel like you've always been pretty good at. Like, I mean, I think it's something that really, like, I mean, from my perspective, like, our relationship really has been that, like, very much encouraging each other, but also, like, what do you know?
Yeah.
What do you want? Like, where do you know, and what choices are going to support that? And so I'm like, I love this, and I am here for it.
Me too. Well, you know, like there's a thing with, you know, Byron Katie, the work, and like that's like a life-changing question. It's like, can you absolutely know that this is true? And it's like, really the answer every single time is no. It's like, no, you cannot. Yeah.
But it's so, like, again, and I'm going to keep using the word confronting and like uncomfortable, because I think we live, and especially I think in American culture, like we thrive on absolutes.
Right.
Like, yes, this is right. I am right. Like, they are wrong. Like, whatever that is.
That's actually a pattern in trauma thinking, is black and white thinking. Just FYI. It's an indication that you're in trauma. Yeah.
Yeah.
America.
Hey, America, you might want to look at that, honey.
Hire a trauma-informed coach. Yes.
America needs some therapy.
Yeah, some therapy.
I love that, though. And I think it's like, it's so, even, just the idea of like stopping to look at, is my life working? Mm-hmm. Most people don't even want to go there.
No.
Like, they don't want to start to ask that question.
No.
And I mean, understandably.
Yeah.
It's, so I think it's
questions
cool.
like that invite opportunity for loss.
Mm-hmm.
Like perceived loss.
Yep.
And that's what seems so scary. Change will always be loss. And a lot of people are way more comfortable staying in an undesired familiar than an unfamiliar loss and change. Mm. And so like there is a choice in that too, which I actually think is fine. It's like if you're actively aware that you're choosing to stay in a singular place and not like look at things, like that's a choice, and that's actually, it's a beautiful option.
Yeah.
It's all an option.
Totally.
And so I think that there is, it's like when the discomfort and the desire for more gets to a certain point, that's when you start looking for those other avenues.
Yep.
Yeah.
When you get tired of the status quo.
Yeah.
Then you start to tiptoe.
What else is possible?
It's one of my favorite questions.
Yes,
so what are some things that have shown up for you that you would have never thought have shown up for you?
What? What are you talking about? Oh, Paula.
I'm just saying, I feel like you've made some major life choices.
To
totally pull you out. We could go wherever you want to go.
No, I'm down, and this will be probably like the first public conversation I have about any of this. So actually, it's interesting because my coaching business has taken a pivot, and I actually haven't launched it yet, which is really exciting.
Amazing.
So I'm going to be diving more into religious recovery in trauma-informed coaching, and so. Backstory. I'm actually currently in process of leaving a high control religion, which some people frame as a cult, but I think that has a strong connotation to it. But a high control religion basically is like a religion that you're raised in that like infiltrates every aspect of your life, that basically removes you from society, creates a lot of separateness, creates a disconnect from like social norms, normal development, really seeks to control like the congregation in a way that like serves the church but is actually really harmful to the people. And so that is the process. One of the processes I am currently going through is I've been leaving for probably the last year and a half, 2 years, but really like finally just talked to my family about it, which is a really big deal because in the church that I'm a part of, if you leave, you're basically completely like excommunicated and shunned. Like your family like can and very often does decide to have nothing to do with you. And so that's brought up some trauma. Yeah.
Understandably.
Yeah. I mean, and the whole process, like there is like this dismantling and deconstructing of identity and what you believe about the world. Like one of the things that's come up that's been insane is how much fear I have in my body about the world outside. Like this is kind of the church that I'm from has this like kind of doomsday, like Armageddon's like right around the corner all the time. And so it's like you wake up every day.
And it has been for like 100 years.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, very much like it's the final part of the
I wouldn't know anything about high control church culture.
Yeah. Do you?
Yeah.
Tell me. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh. No, I was raised Mormon.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Why have you never told me that?
Well, I don't know. It's just never come up. But now that we're both processing our trauma as a result of like...
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, and it's the same. I mean, the way that you speak about it is the same way that,
There is, which, I mean, I don't know why I'm like tiptoeing around this, but the church that I'm from is Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think, like, actually one of the coaches that I've been working with, she's an ex-Mormon. And so part of her coaching is coming out of religion, but also coming out as gay, too. Like, there's both. Yeah. And so it's been a really, like, eye-opening process. And it's great to have, like, her experience specifically because I think there is a lot of similarity between Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses. But some of the differences that I think have been like the harder part to navigate is this shunning process. Like it's with Jehovah's Witnesses, it's like it's hard, fast, and severe. Like they are taught basically to treat you like you don't exist. And there's like a lot of podcasts I've listened to, a lot of things that I've like researched on that, I mean, families of like 4 children will have a child that's like disfellowshipped or disassociated, and they'll be like, we have 3 children. Like, and they'll literally act like their child doesn't exist. And it's framed as painful for the family too, and it's framed as a form of discipline, but it's so harmful that they actually took away the religious designation of Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway because they considered it to be such an inhumane act from cutting people off from society like that and their community that they grew up in.
Wow.
Which this may be too heavy of a topic, but the suicide rate for ex-Jehovah's Witnesses is astronomical because of that process. And so there's a lot of actual governments that are challenging it in court, which is really interesting.
Yeah. And it is really interesting, and I am so excited to see where you go with this like coaching. I mean, that component of the just religious affiliations, like it shapes your entire future. I mean, my family converted when I was 13 and that was like a very formative, like 13 is such a formative time and I think it's really interesting to look back and just even like the suicide thing. Like I know there's especially a lot of like gay members of the church that commit suicide because they don't, when you're in that situation, you don't think that there is nothing else because you're taught that there is nothing else, right? Like the church is the be all end all and what the leadership says.
It's all you know.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot, I mean, I feel like I've been fortunate because of like my career in the hair industry. I've had access and connection and like friends outside of the church and things like that, but there's always been a little bit of a separation. Like I've always like held back, which I still feel like there's a lot of navigating socially of like, how do I participate in the world? And like, you know, what do I do if I don't think the end is coming tomorrow? Like, you know, it's like, do I plan for a future? Like there's all these like questions that come up. But I've also had a lot of experience outside the church that has given me a buffer. A lot of people don't have that. A lot of young people. And like when they get kicked out by their families and they have an identity that they're struggling with and they've had an identity that they've been told has been supremely wrong their whole life. Like, I mean, there's dialogue that like equates being gay to like being a murderer. You know, it's like they're spoken of in the same sentence. And it's like, no. Right. And so if you're hearing that your whole life and you're feeling like you're finally able to express yourself and then your family shuns you and you don't have a place to go, it's like there is this like combination of hopelessness and helplessness that can show up. There are a lot of support groups. Like I've actually participated, and that's something that helped me, was going to some support groups and like meeting people who have come out of the church and like seeing their lives, seeing them happy, seeing them adjusted. There's so many resources on YouTube and podcasts. And it's like, I think it's so essential that anyone who's making that kind of journey, like you have to seek support. Like you have to seek a network.
I am so grateful. First of all, thank you for your vulnerability, being willing to have that conversation. Because even me, it's like I'm being shown where like I still have things that like I need to work through. That like I remember I was watching a show. I can't remember, it was like on Netflix or something about this couple, like this lesbian couple who were former Mormons. I think they were both married and like their families were best friends, and then they fell in love together. And it was so hard for me to like watch it, not because I judge them. I'm so...
That's my coach.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Small world.
Small world.
But it was like, and while I was like so incredibly happy for them and like supporting their choice to create their life in a way that like was true and authentic to them, there was still part of me that was like, wow, I have not processed a lot of like, because there still was this like almost fear for them, fear for me of like, but what's gonna happen? Like, what if, you know? And I think I'm so grateful that you brought that up, because I'm like, okay, girl, it's time to do some more work. Yes. Like ask some more questions.
It's interesting. Like there are so many small things like, and that I think unless someone's actually been through the process of being raised in a religion like that and exiting it, like you don't understand like the scattering of seeds of indoctrination that show up in so many even tiny parts of your life. Like the guilt I feel over certain things, or like I remember like I was talking to my partner and like she was talking about politics or something, and like we're raised as politically neutral, and I was like, I get to think what I want to think. I was like, what? Like, I can think about this and not feel bad.
Totally.
And it was just like this light bulb moment of like these tiny, like they're seemingly tiny, but they infiltrate, and like that is the control. It's like the guilt and the shame and the fear and the questioning and the like complete relinquishing of your own authority in your life.
Yeah.
Like that is the essence of what creates a controllable group.
Totally.
And I mean, we see that in many different things, but I think religions can take it to a different level because of the community and God and like the punishment and the fear. Like it can really just create this like insidious like woven tapestry in your life, and I think it's a perpetual dismantling, like for your whole life.
Yes, that part. And that's exactly what I was going to say, is that I especially and I do connect this with like being raised in the church. Like for me, I'm constantly having to be on the lookout for being like all in on something, because so much of how I was indoctrinated is like you're either in or in the way.
Yeah.
And so whenever I find something, I have this tendency to be like highly like, I guess, I don't even know what the word for it is, but like I'm just really susceptible to like buying into kind of that all in mentality.
Yeah.
And that there is no other way.
Yeah.
Because and I think so much of that is exactly how I was raised. Part of it is just like I have an addictive personality, but also a lot of it is that like if I'm subscribing to an ideology, or if I'm like part of a group or whatever that is, like I have to be like completely in, and I have to prove that I'm committed and all of those things. And so much of that is how I've really had to work on that, because it's, I think, a huge part of that experience.
I think the myopic thinking, I think the one path, I think like the idea of being all in, it's also like tied to acceptance and validation. Totally. It's like that's where, and like if you think about it from a child perspective, like there's usually like 3 roots to trauma, and it's like the lack of safety, the lack of control, or the lack of approval. And like the community, the tribe, the approval is such a big driving factor as you get a little bit older in childhood and you understand that concept. But like if you are disavowed from your community as a child, you literally die. And so there becomes a life and death aspect to like that aspect of approval. And I think that's what religion can play on. It's like, be part of this community, be accepted, and don't do anything to get disapproved, or like you'll literally like die. Yeah. And so I think that there is this feeling like when there's a community to be found, it's like, accept me, take me, validate me, approve me. And like that is very much part of the indoctrination, I think. Yeah. The process. And
it's a trauma response.
It's a trauma response.
It's called a trauma response.
We should have like a bell. Like ding.
It's a trauma response. No, and I think that's like, it's so, man, I'm so excited to see what comes out of this. And I'm so happy for you. And thank you. I mean, always ever more grateful for you and just our friendship.
Same.
Wow. Okay, so what's next for you?
Oof, that's a good question. I am in process of moving and basically dismantling my entire life. And I still technically have not come out to a couple members of my family. So hopefully we get the timing right on this show. So there's that. I mean, that's a challenging process to like to do that especially at 40. Yeah, it's like surprise
to you and everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was late blooming lesbian. I was gonna get that in there. Yeah, so
that'll be the title of the episode.
Yeah, so that's been an interesting process, but like, there's that is part of what's happening. And actually, like, owning that and accepting it and, like, really feeling, like, solid in not only, like, the transformation of, like, my entire, like, foundation of, like, religious identity and, like, dismantling that, but, like, also, like, sexuality, identity, things like that. So that is new.
That part.
I am basically, like, tearing apart my whole life and moving, which is actually really exciting because I think... there's parts like where it's like you create a life because you're trying to like force something like to be good or to be right. Yeah. And I think that's what I did. So there's like a freedom in like taking it apart and like being willing to move and start over. So that's kind of what's happening personally. On the business side, I'm working on launching my coaching program. I'm really looking at It's going to be focused on trauma. A lot of it's going to be focused on religious recovery and like even like dealing with like even like high control aspects of life or relationships. But that is in the works and getting launched. I already started an Instagram page.
You did?
Yeah.
I can't wait. What is it?
It's CXC Coaching.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that's the name of my business. And it's really centered around confidence, clarity, communication.
Amazing.
And like really just like showing up in your life with like full power and authority.
Yeah.
Like getting your own authority back. So I've got that, and yeah. So that's like the main gig right now. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I think too, like, one of the things tying back to what we were talking about before, like, we move through a lot.
Yeah.
But I think even tying back to being in the beauty industry, like there's so many people that whether they're clients sitting in the chair or hairdressers that need these sorts of conversations and need like even just like the little pearls of wisdom that could completely change a paradigm and make things so much easier. And I think I'm really, really excited to see.
Yeah, I think like in the beauty industry particularly, like that's where I started coaching and business, and like that was a big drive to go get the trauma informed certification, because I'm like, there's a lot of trauma playing out here. Know, there's a lot there, and so I think it's like it's applicable to everyone. Like I think hairdressers sometimes just like to put on a happy face and like be the thing for everyone, and like they need the guidance too. Yeah.
How do you, like, sort of on a personal level, because this is something I've been navigating as well, but, like, how do you balance your, like, professional, because you work with the brand, like, your brand partner, like, I work with brands as well, like, how do you balance the sort of conversations, like, trauma and high control churches and things like that with, like, what you're doing with these brands? Like, is it relevant? Is it not relevant? Like, how do you...
I'll let you know when I figure that out. No idea.
Honestly, same.
Yeah. So I actually, this is my best idea.
Yeah.
I started a brand new Instagram page, and I'm going to have different conversations on there.
Yeah.
And I think like, because of like my brand affiliations, it's not, I think there will be some organic crossover.
Totally.
But I realized it was just a separate conversation. It was a separate audience. And so I'm starting over, which is actually really exciting. I'm going to do the same thing on TikTok. And I think I'll have, I'll just have the ability to create conversations that are really unique to the audience.
Yeah.
But they also, it doesn't mean like I'm not the person that I am in both spaces.
Totally.
And so I think it's just talking to people in a relevant way. I think even like when I was just recently at a Behind the Chair show, and I was talking to Mary, and I was like, yeah, this is the coaching that I'm doing, da-da-da-da. It's like, there is such a relevance still in that beauty industry, in that space, that. And she was like, yeah, I can't think of a better person to be this kind of coach. And it was just... It was cool because I think it's still applicable and it's still needed. I mean, people are people and we're all human and go through different forms. I think it's just how you present it.
Totally.
And like the platform that you present it on. So my guess is just start over.
Well, and I think that's like, I mean, in case you didn't know, everybody, this podcast is sponsored by Vagaro, who like I'm also a brand partner with. So I think this conversation is really relevant. But one of the things that I actually love is that they are so open to me having these kinds of conversations. Like they were fully willing to sponsor a podcast without any awareness. I was like, listen, I'm going to bring my friends on and we're going to have conversations. And they were like, yep, we're here for it.
I'm into that. That's
I know.
Amazing.
It is amazing. And I think too, like so many of like the conversations are on content creation and even showing up, like there's a show that they're doing, or I guess a seminar. It's Iconic 23. It's going to be in San Diego. Yeah. September 24th and 25th. You're invited.
Yeah.
And I, even in the conversations about the panels that I'm going to be on, like last year I met Venus Williams, which I was so excited about. Yeah. But even in the conversations with like panel creation, I'm like, hey, is there any wiggle room to bring in this conversation about like mental health and like wellness and just things that are really a part of who I am on a day-to-day basis. And to be honest, like are things that people know about me as a hairdresser. Like they're conversations that I have, and they've been so on board with that. And I think it gives me a lot of hope for the future of the industry. I mean, I don't know what my role in the industry is going to be in 10 years, but like it gives me a lot of hope because I think traditionally in the beauty industry is like, you don't talk about religion, politics,
Right.
like mental health, like money, like there's things that you just don't talk about. And I do think that's
smoke and mirrors. Like everyone's happy, everyone's fine all the time, no matter what.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of similarities there and like a lot of the high control indoctrination that we talked about. But, and I'm not saying like, you know, open a fire hose of like all your personal perspectives, but I think there is a space and I have a hope that there will be more spaces where people like us that want to have these kinds of conversations and are doing these kinds of work can use platforms or connect with brands that are willing to share their platform to have these kinds of conversations. And I think that's like,
I think it's culturally and societally right now, like there is a demand for these conversations in all avenues. Like there is like this collective consciousness that's shifting, and I think it's going to infiltrate everywhere. I do think that the people that resist it are going to be the ones that probably end up like with people not willing to participate so much. And I think that there are brands that are coming forward, like in all industries, that are facilitating these kind of conversations because they are relevant and they are important and they are connecting. And they create this like destigmatization.
Yep.
Whoa.
Here, I'm with you.
Yeah, that was hard.
Well done.
Yes, thank you. Around the conversation, like around mental health and things, and like especially like at an influencer level or like a recognizable face level, like someone saying like, hey, I've struggled with depression or anxiety can be so healing and empowering to someone else, which I have struggled with both.
Yeah.
And so it's like to be able to say that without shame and create connection, like that's beautiful. Like, and if the brands don't get behind that, I think there will be a separating at some point.
Yeah.
And I don't think it has to be this big overriding like scary thing. It's like, no, this is real. We're people. And when you are in the service industry in particular, you are susceptible to certain things in different ways. Like you open your energy up to different things. You create like different connection. You pour yourself out. Like, what are you doing to like put back in? And so I think that those conversations, I think they have to happen.
For sure.
And like the brands that are willing to do it, like, good job.
Yeah, no, I think I think there are I see a lot of brands that are kind of tiptoeing into that and no one's really sure. But I think the reality is too that there's a lot of, I mean, we talked about gurus. I think there's a lot of people out there posing to have it right. And like, oh yeah, I suffered from depression, and like no disrespect to anyone that, has dealt that. It's same and it's horrible.
Right.
Like, but I think there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I have it right. Let me be the voice of this movement. And I personally don't think that that's the way that
agree.
It's going to change. I think it is going to be through conversations like this and people that are willing to be like, I don't have all the answers, but here's what I do know. And I do have empathy.
Right.
Like, I don't have answers. I have empathy.
Right. Yeah. Like that, like the thing in coaching that is the most powerful presence is simply being a witness to someone else. Like, I see you. I can hold space for you.
Yep.
Like, I can be here with you and be a presence for you. Like, I don't have to fix you. I don't have to give you an answer. And I think, like, the people that are in that space of, like, having the answers, having the path, having the whatever, like, yeah, okay. Like, but it's not going to fix anything.
Totally.
I mean, like I said earlier, there is a chance it actually could cause more harm if it doesn't work for someone.
For sure.
And they're like, I've tried everything and this didn't work. Like, versus someone saying, like, I see you, I've been there, like, let's look at this together. Yeah. Like, or I'll just stand here with you. Like, there is such a power in human connection that, like, it just creates change on its own. It's like the act of observing can create change versus, like, the forcing of the fixing. Yeah.
Well, and also, like, the forcing of the fixing with the, like, from the anchor of I am wrong.
Right.
Is like... And it's something, this is like a whole other podcast, but this is something that I've realized more and more in my own work, in my own journey, is that, like, if I'm coming at anything from the perspective of, like, I am wrong, I am bad, I am fucked up, like, I've already lost. And, like, really the potency that's available, the potency of healing that's available actually gets dimmed.
Right.
Because, like, my core belief is that I am wrong. And it took me a really long time to get there. So if you're just tiptoeing into your self-healing journey, give it some time. Yeah. But, like, I think that's a really interesting, it's an interesting way to look at it, because it, like you said, we've said before, it takes time.
Yeah.
And you have to be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
Like that is the biggest thing, is like having empathy for other people and being present. It's so easy to be present with other people when they're in their journey, but like what would it take for you to have that same empathy and presence for yourself is the conversation I often have, like with myself, like be gentle with yourself,
I'm
Paula.
like literally going through that right now. And I'm like, do it for yourself.
Yeah. And it's like, I feel like this Iconic 23, I'm in the process of developing my panel, so I feel like we might need to have a conversation about.
I'm down.
Just check your calendar, September 24th and 25th.
I will.
By the way, small commercial break. If you guys want to watch, if you want to come play at Iconic 23, go to Vagaro.com, and if you do Paula P, you actually get money off of your ticket.
Paula P.
So Paula P. That's where it's at. But I know I this is a conversation that I would love to have more of, and I think there's a way to like tiptoe it in a way that's like so relevant, like you said, to service providers. And I love you so much.
I love you so much.
I love you so much. And I think like it's so rare to have those people in your life that truly don't judge you and are just like want to see you win and don't do competition and just like are like, hell yeah, you go, like and you know, like we mentioned at the beginning, like it's not that we chat every single day, but it's like there's always this like joy and just like healing for me and our friendship. And so I'm like so grateful for you.
I know, I feel like we have this like interesting cycle where it's like we come together and we're like sharing all these things. There's like a parallel to it.
Totally.
And there's like all these, it's amazing.
I know, it's really it's actually a really cool thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so on a much less serious note, not that the conversation has to be over, but I have to tell you. So one of the things with the Paula Peralta Show that I decided, if you know anything about me, you know that I love Crocs.
Yes.
So every guest that comes on the show gets a pair of Crocs.
I've never had Crocs before.
So I actually got you a pair of Crocs.
Oh my god, they're so cute!
And I decorated them with things that I thought would be.
Paula, why'd you put a rainbow on there?
I know. I was like, she's gonna look at this one in two ways.
It's so cute. No, I'm obsessed.
Yeah. So you have to show them to the camera because I got all the gibbets and everything and like put them on.
They're so cute.
So those are your Crocs.
I love them. I'm obsessed. They're adorable. I wear them every day for the rest of my life.
They're so good and they're so comfortable. I don't have a pair of those yet. But
I'm into it.
As I was like going into decorating yours, I was like, should I just like?
I'm just gonna hold them like this.
Perfect.
Like a baby.
There you go. Sweet
you got the baby, I got the baby.
Totally. They're so cute though, and I love
adorable.
them. I was like, okay, which of these gibbets are Cassandra? Like,
you're channeling me.
Totally.
I love it. Thank you.
Anyway, so that's my gift to you. Thank you so much for being here. So okay, if people want more, if they want to, like, he's catching flies.
Yeah, good job, buddy.
If people want more, like, where should they connect? How do they connect? Yeah. When is this, first of all, when is this religious recovery conversation? Because consider me your first sign up.
Yeah. Good question. Mm-hmm. No, I'm working on creating content around it right now, just to really like start the conversation because it's so new.
For sure.
So I'm hoping within.
You can also put the Crocs on the floor.
I like them. I'm hoping to have it launched in like the next month. So amazing. I've got my coaching business up and going. I coach. I do a lot of just personal development and business clients right now. But a lot of it is centered around like emotional blocks and things. So I coach a lot on relationships and things. So I do have that currently going. You can find that on cxccoaching.com or at Instagram, cxccoaching. You can also find me at Cassandra Platinum.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the hair vibe.
The beauty.
I do also like coaching within that. So I do like color and business coaching centered around like beauty industry things. But yeah, that's.
Which, okay, we didn't talk about this, and I feel like I don't know how long it's been that we've been chatting, but I do want to talk about this because I will say that when we talk about salon and beauty business coaches, you're one of the people that I've always looked to. Like, if ever I was in like a business situation where I was like, I don't know what to do, like we would have really incredible conversations, and I feel like there's very few people that I'm like their perspective, like they get it right. And I think you're one of those people. I think you're one of those people for me, for sure. So if you're looking for a business coach, call Cassandra. But what is that like? can you talk a little bit about your journey through the beauty industry? Because, like, you owned a salon, then you had nothing, then you had a studio, then, you know, like, can you just talk about that? And, like, what's one piece of advice that you would give salon owners currently? Yeah. So let's start with salon owners. Like, maybe they have employees or whatever.
The one piece of advice. Work on yourself. Yeah.
She said it.
I said it.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. And then what about, like, salon suite? Like, stylists that are in studios or, like, independent? What's a piece of advice that you would give? Like, work on yourself.
Work on yourself. Everyone. Yes, that. But I would say in, like, salon suites, I think one of the things that, like, it can be a benefit, but also it can be kind of a detriment is the isolation. Mm-hmm. And so, like, if that is something that's starting to take a toll or causing burnout, like, look for a community or, like, actively take part in something that creates connection where you don't lose that. Mm-hmm. Or just find an assistant. Like, do something that creates, like, some, like, connection and inertia around that. Like, I think hairdressers by large are social beings. So there is a lot of benefit to being in your own suite. But, like, facilitating human connection on any level, like, can keep us going and energized. Yeah. So... And work on yourself.
And work on yourself.
And work on yourself.
Do the work. Do the work.
Do the work.
Do the work.
Yeah.
I love that. Ugh, I'm so excited. I can't wait until we chat again in 6 months.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
Just kidding. I feel like it'll be sooner than that. But that's amazing. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Goodness. I know.
I spilled all the beans.
I know. I love it.
Am I going to have, like, this hangover afterwards? Like, what did I do?
Like, what did I do? Yeah, like, no, I mean, I think, like, listen.
I'm into it.
Anyone, yeah. And also, like, if anyone says anything, send them to me and I will handle them. Like, but I think it's, I mean, you know, it's a safe space.
No, it's actually really exciting to talk openly about this.
Yes.
Like, it's been, like, a big thing. It's been in process, like, literally, like, really big over the last 8 months. Mm-hmm. And so it's, like, to be able to actually, like, share and, like, you know, just all the changes. Like, it's so exciting and empowering to actually feel like myself. Ugh, like that is... I've held back in a lot of ways, I think, in, like, how I've, even, like, in business or, like, on social media or whatever, because I think there's just aspects where I was like, oh, I have to hide. I have to hold it back. And, like, no.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
That makes me so happy for you. Like, and I think, too, I mean, I will say, I remember the first conversation that we had where you're like, I'm dating someone, and I was like, oh, I'm so happy for you. Like, it's a woman.
It's a lady.
And I was still like, hell yeah. Like, you know what I mean? And I think I'm so proud of you. And I don't know that, like, I don't think that's something that people say often enough. Yeah. But, like, I want you to know that I'm really proud of you. And I'm so happy for you. And I'm inspired and, like, motivated and just all of those different things. And I think that's, like, that is the little pretty bow in this whole conversation, is that really also is, like, one of the byproducts of living your truth. Yeah. Is that, like, you actually inspire other people to do the same thing, whatever that looks like. And it may not be, like, a direct correlation, but there is something where it's like, wow, look at her, like, living her life on her terms. And then it's like, then it just inspires the question of, like, what does that look like for me? Am I doing that?
What else is possible?
Yeah. As you know, my favorite question. Yes. But I think that's the thing is, it's like, I ask that all the time, what else is possible? And I've actually changed a little bit. I'm like, what else is possible here that I haven't even considered?
Oh, yeah.
Because it's so good because, like, if you're... The zingers! Zing! But it's the thing where, like, so often, like, our imagination can be our greatest limitation. Yeah. Because it's only based on what we've seen or what we've experienced or the story that we've told ourselves about what is or is not, like, possible, acceptable, whatever that is. And so when it's that thing that's like, what's the thing that I've never considered? Like, what's the thing that would scare me to death? Yeah. Like, and then, you know, and you can choose it or not choose it, but it's just, like, being willing to go beyond what's comfortable.
To even look at it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that's, like, I'm so excited to see even in the next, you know, maybe you'll be on the next season of the Paula Peralta Show and we'll have where are they now? Yeah. But I think that's the thing is, it's like, it used to be, and I'm sure you'll probably, like, relate to this, but it used to be that part of my, I guess, security was in knowing where I was going to be in 5 years, and now I'm like, I have no idea.
And that's exciting.
Yes, and I'm so here for it. Yeah. Because it forces me to get up every day and be like, all right, how are we going to navigate the day? Like, what's going to show up and what tools do I have in my toolbox to, like...
It forces presence. Yeah.
Which...
Key to the kingdom.
Work on yourself.
Work on yourself.
All right. Thanks for being here. I love you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye,
I love
everyone.
you. You're so cute. Hey.
Bye.
Bye.